Hi and welcome to the Room of Rock with Ted and I. Now this time in the Room of Rock we've decided we're going to give you a look at our Fender Stratocaster, which is a model you may never have seen before. So if it intrigues you at all, hang around and see what we've got in this here guitar case. Well, as a slight aside to this video, today is Father's Day and my two daughters bought me this, which is a handmade, hand-stitched leather guitar strap made in the UK, which is nice. It's been bought in local industry, and it's in like a tan brown, which is lovely. I don't know if you can see that, whether the colour's coming out there, but a very thoughtful little gift. So I shall put some strap locks on it and that'll get pride of place on probably my latest guitar. Well, as we always say here in the Room of Rock, if you like what we're up to, please like and subscribe. It means a lot to us. It means a lot to Teddy Boy in his plight to be bigger than Sooty. He reckons this is his breakthrough year as always. So your help with a like and a subscribe means a lot to him, and it'll help boost his morale. Well, here's the guitar in its full glory. It's a Fender Stratocaster contemporary series, and it's a System 3. The System 3 is the type of tremolo unit it's got on it, which is a locking tremolo with a set of fine tuners on the tailpiece here. The guitar was quite innovatory at its time. A lot of the features it had on it didn't actually catch on. And I think it was aimed at combating all the super strats that were coming out at the time. You know, Van Halen's 1984 album was still very much prominent. It was, you know, a year old at this time, so everyone wanted to sound like Eddie. Everyone wanted locking tremolos, pointy headstocks, and to do all the tremolo screams and that. And I think Fender decided they need to do something to combat the wave of copies and takes on the super strat that were out there getting sold, and they needed to get in on the act themselves. And this was one of their solutions. They did various models in the range. They did both Stratocasters, and they also did Telecasters. I think they did Telecasters with locking tremolos, 2 humbuckers, and a humbucker and 2 single coils. This guitar itself, I think now, and I'm talking from memory, was available either as this with a humbucker and 2 single coils, or with 2 humbuckers. And interestingly, I've got an album by a supergroup at the time called GTR, I think, which featured Steve Hackett and Steve Howe on guitar, and the cover shot is actually a close-up of the bridge unit of one of these guitars, but that one's got 2 humbuckers on it. Funnily enough, the colour I actually wanted when I went in the shop was, they did like a metallic-y green. But the only reason I wasn't so keen on that was it still had the black headstock. It didn't have a matching headstock. So it would have been a green body, all black pick guard and knobs, and still the black headstock. So I thought all black was more in keeping at the time. Funnily enough, one came up for sale recently on eBay, and I looked at it and thought, no, it still does look nice, but it might have looked nicer either with a natural headstock or with a green headstock to match the body. Anyway, what we'll do, I'll show you some of the features on the guitar, and a bit later on I'll plug it in and you can have a listen to it. I mean, there's no real surprises. It sounds like a Stratocaster, and then when you go to the bridge pickup, it sounds like a Stratocaster with a humbucker. The humbucker is tappable, or coil split, whatever you. There's a little micro switch here that does that function. Anyway, I'll try and get the camera in a bit closer and we can look at some of the features so you can see them a bit better. I also, when I restrung this last time, I took some pictures actually inside the guitar, so I can show you those, show you how a couple of the bits work. Because interestingly, that the humbucker isn't mounted to the pickguard, it's mounted directly into the body. There's a couple of metal ferrules set into the wood of the body, and it's mounted to those. So when you take the pickguard off, the controls come off, and the middle and the neck middle and neck single coils come off, but the bridge humbucker stays put. So strange way they did it. Looking at the shape of the pickup, it looks very much like the 2 humbucker Elite series of guitars that Fender did, which were sort of probably a little stab at them getting into the Les Paul market back in the 80s, because they look very similar to me to those humbuckers. Again, they were viewed as very good guitars, but they just didn't catch on. I think people wanted Fender to do what Fender are best at, and Gibson to do what Gibson are best at, because Gibson over the years have had a go at doing super strats and things, and they've all met with varying degrees of failure really. They're far better known for their superb Les Pauls, SGs and 335s and the like, you know, whereas Fender, they're remembered very much for their Stratocasters and their Telecasters. And probably, and I don't know, but I would imagine that their most popular range is possibly, if not the American standard, it'll be probably the more retro series, the reissues of the 50s and 60s models that they're best known for. Anyway, I'll get the camera in a bit closer, and so you can see some of the features on this guitar that make it a little bit more unusual. One clever little feature is the actual tremolo arm itself. It's a push-fit tremolo arm, and it features a couple of Allen keys on it. On that end, there's an Allen key, which is the end that goes into the body. And on the tip, if you unscrew the chrome tip, take that off, that reveals an even smaller one, which is also used for adjusting the saddle pieces on the bridge. And inside here, when you tip it out, there's a tiny little piece of like plastic or rubber sleeving that just goes over the top of that, whether that's to stop it rattling or whatever when it's in, or just to cushion maybe possibly the end of the tremolo tip, so when you tighten it up it rests on that rather than it grinding in and damaging the end of the Allen key, flattening it off over a period of time. But that's just one clever little feature that the guitar had. Well, just to give you an overview of the guitar, it's got a 22 fret rosewood fingered board, medium jumbo frets. The 22nd fret is really done by letting the rosewood overhang the maple neck slightly. It's got a skunk stripe down the back to let in the truss rod. It's a Bioflex truss rod, which means it'll work forwards and backwards, so it doesn't just work on the string tension letting the neck come forward. It will actually physically force the neck forward should it need to. If there's not enough relief in the neck and the strings aren't pulling it forward, you can physically put relief in the neck. It's got a lock-in nut, and that's done with a cam action here. Look, you've got this little thing there that you move, and the idea is it's side locking. So the idea, rather than putting pressure down and maybe pulling it out of tune, the idea being that with a side locking nut that it shouldn't be pulling the strings out of tune so much. It does slightly, but you've got the fine tuners anyway. The other thing is it's got two very small, and I'll try and maybe put some photographs up so you can see, two small Allen bits there, so you can actually adjust the nut height with an Allen key, so you don't have to cut the nut, because the nut is actually all metal, and is adjustable using an Allen key. Something that I think Gibson did in models of a couple of years ago on their Les Pauls and that. It's got a 4-bolt micro tilt neck, so you can adjust the neck with an Allen key through there. You loosen off the neck screws and then you can adjust the angle of the neck. Fender did it in the 70s with the 3 bolt micro tilt neck, which wasn't deemed as very successful, but the 4 position or 4 screw neck with micro tilt does seem to work and does seem to hold the neck very, very steady. What else? It's got a single ply pick guard. There's no lamination on there, so it gives it an all, you know, black feel. The knobs, I don't know whether you can see those in these light, they're stamped with a Fender logo on them. You've got an overall master volume and you've got a master tone. The tone is Fender's TBX tone, which is really clever. It almost works like an active tone without having to have batteries in the guitar. From 0 through to 5 acts like a normal passive tone control, and then there's a like center indent, so you can feel it like notch. Then when you go past that, from 5 to 10 actually boosts the higher frequencies. You can hear it. It's a stacked pot with a resistor and a capacitor on it. I'm not sure the physics behind it, but it's a great mod, and it's a mod that you can buy these and you can actually add them to, if you've got a Squier Strat or something like that, or a Mexican Strat that doesn't have that feature, just has passive tone controls. It is something you can add. I've in fact added 2 of them onto my Squier Stratocaster, and my Telecaster's actually got a TBX tone control on it as well. I modded that to have that on it because I was just so impressed with them. You've got here the standard 5-way switch. It's hum cancelling in positions 2 and 4, and then you've got obviously the coil tap switch there, which is like a micro switch on and off. I think it's possibly done like that to make it look maybe a bit hot rodded rather than you know, a factory guitar. Interestingly, you'll notice there's no jack socket on the front of the guitar. That's on the edge of the body there, and there's a back route, and you can see that, and there's a little plate there if you can see that, and that's purely, there's no battery, that's purely to access the jack socket. That's all that's for under there. One other clever feature with this guitar is to adjust the tremolo, the spring tension. As you can see, there's no back route in here for the tremolo cavity. You do it, I don't know if you can see that, by the strap pin there. Look, there's a little hex bolt, and you adjust that by way of putting in the tremolo arm. So you unplug your tremolo. If I do this, there you go, pop that in there, and then you wind that round to increase or decrease the spring tension, and then that'll adjust how you have the bridge sitting off the guitar. So at the moment I've got it just sitting fairly parallel to the body of the guitar. It's a dual pivot knife edge tremolo. I don't know if you can see that on camera there, but there's a machined knife edge pivot there for it, and these 2 bits are mounted very much so into the body of the guitar. The single coils have got their staggered pole pieces to give it a vintage vibe. Yeah, so it really was, you know, quite a clever bit of kit. When you look at the headstock, you've got 2 string trees, which are like kind of sort of low friction string trees acting on the D, G, B and high E string to keep the tension over the nut. One thing I liked about the guitar was the fact that on the back of the neck there, there's no holes or anything for where the locking nut is. It's all mounted from the front. Because what I didn't like with things like the Floyd Rose, they tend to drill through the back of the neck and have bolts going through, which I always think looks a bit unsightly, and obviously it's putting quite big holes in a weaker point of the neck. But that's just me. The body, as you can see, the guitar's in pretty good condition. There's no buckle rash on it and no dings. As I say, I've had it from new. I've had it since 1985 because it's an 85 guitar, and you can tell that because the serial number is E85. These Fenders were the first Fenders to come out of Japan carrying the Fender name. Before that, it had all been branded as Squire, but when they went over to the Contemporary series, they actually branded them as proper full fat Fenders coming out of Japan, and the quality was superb, as we know. And there are people that would argue that the Japanese Fenders are some of the best that have ever been produced. I've seen some of the American ones. I'm not saying custom shop and things like that, but I have seen some of the American ones, and they still do leave a little bit to be desired in the quality stakes, whereas this is, you know, has been without issue for all these years. So the thing is with it, the downfall with this guitar was the fact that it would have a tendency to break the strings, because of the way the tremolo works, it's kind of wiggling the string, so it's kind of the strings doing that, which would fatigue it and it would break. So quite often, if I was gigging the thing and I was giving it a lot of use on the tremolo, I would break a string. And what you do with it, I mean, that's fully floating, then you move it back and that locks the bridge. So as the tremolo arm goes back, the idea is it locks the bridge in position. So if you do break a string, you can move it back, bring the guitar back into tune, because as you know with the tremoloed guitar, once the string breaks, it tends to then throw it completely out of tune. You can then lock it into position, and then you can carry on, finish the song before you have to change string. The way you put a string in on this is a real fiddle. I recently restrung it, and I restrung it with 10s because that's what it's got on it. I normally use 11s on my Fenders, and I wouldn't want to risk doing anything on this that might break something, because obviously parts are totally unobtainable now. You have to basically bend the end of the string in kind of almost an S shape to feed it through the tailpiece, and you know you're already forcing it in quite a position to then string it up. So yeah, I didn't want to risk putting anything heavier on there that would take more force to feed in and get into the saddles. So and I think that's possibly why these guitars didn't stay in production for longer, was possibly that, you know, the Floyd Rose did take off and become very popular as the locking tremolo. I mean, now really when you look at it, in essence, there's, you know, in 2019 there's, you know, 3 styles of tremolo possibly. You've got your traditional Fender and variations on that. I mean, you know, people have put different nuts, they've put different saddles maybe, and various things, but they're, in essence, they are the vintage Fender bridge. You've got your Bigsby, which is fine for more sort of rockabilly and surf stuff and more gentle tremolo use. And then you've got, you know, your locking Floyd Rose tremolo, and they are really, everything else is kind of a variation on that. Back in the 80s there were numerous designs. Kayla were coming up with things. Washburn had one called the Wonder Bar, which you know, was meant to be able to drop the pitch and keep everything in tune, so you could kind of transpose on it, a bit like the one on the Steinberg headless guitars. They stayed in tune, so you could actually lock them down and drop, you know, a semitone and stay in tune. So really, I think, it fell foul to the fact that other types of tremolo overtook it. I mean, it's fine with moderate use and that, but if you were going to be doing a Van Halen set or something like that, you'd find it lacking, as you kept breaking strings. Whilst it would do it and it would return to pitch possibly, you'd be breaking strings right, left and centre, and it'd be an absolute faff to restring at a gig. But as a piece of history, and a moment, a snapshot in time, I think that's why it's quite interesting. The first Fenders to come out of Japan, the fact that it was very much of its time, of the 80s, and you'd listen to pop music and anything that had a guitar solo in it, and the guitar solo would feature a lot of tremolo use or whammy bar use, starting off out of tune and letting the tremolo come up to pitch. You listen to that kind of thing. Bands like Go West and that, that all their guitarist, he was constantly using the whammy bar. So it wasn't just heavy rock and heavy metal people. It was just almost that style of playing at that time. And now it's become, much less so, much less used, other than in more the heavy rock genre. Pop music and that doesn't necessarily, cry out for that kind of tremolo usage. But I do think it has its place in history, and it's an interesting point in Fender's history. And I thought you might be interested in it for that point of view. The locking nut, it's quite a clever idea. And the fact that the nut is height adjustable with an Allen key, so you don't have to cut anything with a file, is clever. The fact it's got a 22 fret neck, which was unusual on a Fender back then. The TBX tone control, the overall tone control, the locking trem, the humbucker single coil configuration is a popular hot rod sort of Strat type pickup configuration. And I thought you might just like to see it. It might be something you've never seen before. I can vouch for the fact this one is 100% original, because I had it from new all those years, from 1985 to now. So that's 85 to 95, 95 to 2005, 2015. I've had it for 34 years. It's frightening. Absolutely frightening. But there you go. The only thing that has been changed on this guitar, and that was done under warranty, was the locking nut. I hadn't had it very long, and the little pivot pin there, I don't know if you can see that, there's a little pivot pin that does the cam lever, that snapped, and it was changed under warranty. And they said to be very careful when you lock the strings, you bring it up to about there, because you can adjust the tension here. So you adjust that cam to about there, so that's just putting tension on the strings, and then you just lock it, so you don't put a lot of pressure on it, because apparently these had a habit of breaking. So after that, obviously very careful with it, because didn't want it to break again, and obviously now the parts are obsolete, so you wouldn't actually get a new part for it if you did break it again. You might be able to get something made or make something out of a piece of steel pin, but it's not something I'd like to try for one minute. Anyway, other than that, it's 100% original, and I know that obviously for a fact because I've had it from new. Right, time to give you a few little sound bites. So this is the neck pickup. TBX control is set to the middle, so effectively acting like a normal passive tone control. middle. Middle pickup. Neck and bridge. Now this is with the humbucker in coil tap mode. Now I shall engage the humbucker and leave it in the same pickup selector position. Just strum a chord, so that's in the full humbucker mode. Then coil tapped. I think you can maybe just hear it filling the sound out a bit more. So now neck bridge pickup, coil tapped. Then I'll flick that on to full humbucker mode. I think you can hear it's now a fuller sound. Probably more mid-focused. Quickly flick the coil tap off. Traditional Stratocaster tone, then on. More mid-rangey sound, I think. Now I shall flick it onto the naughty channel. And that's the neck pickup. So neck and middle. pickup. So middle and bridge coil tapped. Then I shall now flick on the humbucker. Now I've coil tapped it again, and this is going to be the bridge pickup, coil tap. I shall go into full humbucker mode. So there you go. The amplifier's not set that hot. I think I've got the gain about halfway, or maybe just under halfway. I could crank the gain up a little bit and give you a sound of what it sounds like with the amp running a bit more gain on the maybe just the bridge pickup. So I'll just alter that. So this is with the preamp set to just over half. I mean, it goes from 0 to 20 on this, so it's set at about 12. Then I'll coil tap it. Now I don't know whether you'll pick that up on the camera, but you can instantly hear the buzzing where it's picking up stuff from the lights and the various other electronics. So that's humbucker, coil tap. Well, what I'll do, rather than play out on this guitar, I'll put a link in the description to another video I did where I actually used this, where I wrote a little theme tune for my daughter's YouTube channel, Hey Amy Jane, where you can hear me playing the guitar a bit more. On that particular video, I used a couple of effects which I don't often do. I mean, this is, as you know, just going straight into the amp and being recorded from that. I used a Boss CS2 compressor sustainer and a Boss DM2 analog delay in front of the amp, just to give it a bit of more compression and a little bit of a short delay. If you're interested, both pedals are Black Label, made in Japan from the 80s. Just showing my age when I bought them, but if you're a bit of a geek like me and like that sort of thing, there you go. But whether they sound any better from the made in Taiwan ones now, I don't know, because I've got some made in Taiwan ones and they're good. So, but there you go. Right, whenever you're ready then, fellas.